The Awakening from Beyond. The observatory at Neptune's L4 point was the quietest post in the Terran Alliance. Most signal analysts requested transfers within months, unable to bear the isolation and endless silence of deep space monitoring. But senior analyst Ilara Chen had requested 3 consecutive extensions, finding peace in the void where others found madness. On her 2,417th day at Outpost Sentinel, Ilara's tranquility shattered when her equipment detected something impossible. The signal came from the Vega Drift, a region avoided by all sapient species. No ships traveled there, no probes were sent. It was the dark corner of the cosmic map where navigational charts simply ended, not with warnings or prohibitions, but with elegant emptiness. 17 alien civilizations, from the crystalline Arcturians to the gaseous Vol Collective, all avoided the region by silent agreement. Director Patel, Ilara's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I've detected a signal pattern from the drift. Transmission characteristics match no known civilization. The holographic display of Director Patel frowned. Sensor malfunction. Recalibrate and. Already completed 3 full-spectrum recalibrations. Ilara interrupted. The signal persists. It's structured. 17-second intervals. Perfect mathematical precision. Patel's expression darkened. Initiate Protocol Epsilon. I'm contacting High Command. Within hours, Earth's most brilliant minds converged virtually to analyze the signal. Dr. Wasato, Earth's foremost senolinguist, was the first to notice the pattern beneath the static. It's not random noise, Dr. Sato explained to the assembled council. There's a linguistic structure buried within the mathematical sequence. It contains 3 distinct segments that repeat in a syntactical pattern consistent with language. Admiral Ibrahima looked skeptical. Can you translate it? Not precisely, Dr. Sato replied. But we've isolated a recurring pattern that translates roughly to silence remains sealed, followed by something our algorithms interpret as either danger or guardian. The room fell quiet until the Historical Archives Director Lopes spoke. There's something you need to see. The display shifted to show ancient records, dust-covered and forgotten. The Vega Drift hasn't always been avoided. 5,000 years ago, humanity sent an expedition there. The Pathfinder mission. Every ship vanished. All 23 vessels, simply gone. No distress calls, no debris fields. After that, we never returned. And the other species? Admiral Ibrahima asked. They've always avoided it, Lopes continued. When asked why, they give different reasons. Navigational hazards, religious taboos, resource scarcity. But they all stay away. We assumed it was superstition until now. The signal continued its rhythmic pulse, 17 seconds of complex data, then silence, then again. Always the same, always perfect. It's a warning, whispered Ilara, who had been patched into the meeting. Or a lock. Every eye turned to her. The pattern, she explained. It's too regular, too persistent. Natural phenomena show variation. This doesn't. It's artificial. I think it's a boundary marker. Admiral Ibrahima's expression hardened. For what? I don't know, Ilara admitted. But whatever it is, it's been contained for at least 5 millennia. The debate raged for days while the signal continued its endless cycle. Some argued for immediate investigation, others for permanent quarantine. The deciding vote came from an unexpected quarter. The Arcturians, Earth's closest allies, who broke their silence on the matter for the first time in recorded history. Their message was brief. The dream that wakes must remain sleeping. The signal is the seal. To answer is to break. But human curiosity has never heeded warnings. Despite objections, despite fears, Mission Commander Darius Kane was ordered to take the advanced research vessel Prometheus to investigate the signal source. The mission parameters were clear. Observe only, do not engage, do not respond to the signal. This is insanity, Kane argued during his final briefing. Every instinct and ally we have is telling us to leave this alone." "Your objection is noted, Commander," replied Fleet Admiral Joe. "But we need to know what's out there. Knowledge is our best defense." "Against what?" Kane demanded. "That's what you're going to find out." The Prometheus departed Earth's orbit carrying a crew of 30 specialists, scientists, military personnel, and Ilara Chen, whose understanding of the signal had become unmatched. As they traveled beyond the edge of settled space, strange phenomena began to manifest. Crew members reported dreams of endless corridors and watching eyes. Equipment malfunctioned in patterns that mimicked the 17-second pulse of the signal. Most disturbing were the whispers that sometimes replaced static in the communication system, sounds that formed no words but left listeners with unshakable dread. When they reached the boundary of the Vega Drift, the Prometheus halted. Before them stretched emptiness that sensors insisted was filled with something their instruments couldn't identify. "It's like looking at a blind spot in your vision," Ilara explained as the crew stared at the view screens. "The instruments know something's there, but they can't tell us what." "Deploy the probe," Kane ordered. The unmanned vessel crossed the invisible boundary and immediately began transmitting data. The signals were chaotic, contradictory, readings that suggested the probe existed in multiple states simultaneously. Then came the visual feed. What they saw defied comprehension. Space itself seemed to fold and unfold like origami in the hands of an invisible artist. Structures that couldn't exist by the laws of physics hung suspended in void. Not ships or stations, but something older, something that had perhaps been there since before humanity's ancestors climbed down from trees. And at the center of it all, a vast spiral formation pulsed with dark energy, 17 seconds between each heartbeat. "It's responding to the probe," Ilara whispered, watching her instruments. "The signal pattern is changing." The new pattern spread through the Prometheus's systems like infection. Screens flickered with symbols no human had ever seen. The ship's quantum eye began reciting poetry in dead languages before shutting down completely. Then silence, complete and absolute. In that silence, something answered. It came not as sound but as understanding, looming directly in the minds of everyone aboard. A presence vast and ancient and patient turned its attention upon them, aware after millennia of silence. "UAVANS-LDRD. The seal is broken." The probe exploded in a flash of impossible light, and the view screens went dark. When they recovered, the boundary was visible, a shimmering curtain across the stars, and it was tearing open. "Full reverse. Get us out of here," Kane shouted as reality itself seemed to warp around them. The Prometheus barely escaped, engines straining as space distorted behind them. They fled toward Earth, carrying mourning and terror in equal measure. But they were not alone. Something followed, something that had waited 5,000 years for someone to answer its call. As they approached the outer colonies, they discovered the silence had spread. Outposts went dark, ships disappeared, and always, 17 seconds apart, a pulse of energy rippled through subspace like the footfall of something impossibly large. Earth prepared for war against an enemy it couldn't comprehend. Fleets assembled, weapons charged. But Ilara Chen, studying the expanding signal pattern, came to a terrible realization. "We're not facing invasion," she told the Emergency Council. "We're facing judgment." The signal wasn't just a warning. It was a test. One we failed the moment we answered. Across the solar system, 17 seconds apart, the stars began to blink. The defiance of stars. Command carrier Thermopylae hung in high Earth orbit like a steel promise. Humanity would not vanish quietly. Aboard, Commander Darius Kane watched tactical displays as reports came in from across the frontier. The entities, now simply called the Watchers, continued their inexorable advance from the Vega Drift, their passage marked by distortions in space-time, and the silence they left behind. "What do we know?" Kane asked the assembled officers and specialists. Dr. Waysado gestured to the holographic display. They're not a species as we understand the term. Based on all observations, they appear to be sentient manifestations of physical laws, what ancient cultures might have called gods or demons. And they've been contained in the drift for 5,000 years, continued Ilara Chen. The signal was part of a complex dimensional lock created by multiple species working together, including the predecessors of the Arcturians. Kane frowned. Why were they imprisoned? The records we've retrieved from Arcturian archives suggest the Watchers were once guardians of this galactic sector, explained Ilara. Created or evolved to protect developing intelligent life from cosmic threats. But they became obsessive. Their protection became control, then dominance. They decided the best way to protect life was to regulate it completely, added Dr. Sado. When species resisted, the Watchers began eliminating civilizations they deemed chaotic or unpredictable. So they're cosmic gardeners who got too enthusiastic with the pruning shears, Kane summarized. And now they're free because we couldn't leave well enough alone. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Ramos, interrupted. Sir, we've lost contact with Jupiter Station and all outer colonies. The distortion wave will reach Mars in approximately 6 hours. Kane turned to Ilara. You understand their patterns better than anyone. How do we fight them? She shook her head. They exist partially outside our dimension. Conventional weapons would be like throwing stones at a hurricane. There must be something, Kane insisted. The alliance of species managed to contain them before. At a terrible cost, Dr. Seto interjected. According to the Arcturian records, 7 civilizations were completely destroyed in the process. They sacrificed themselves to create the lock. Kane stared at the tactical display, watching the advancing wave of silence. Then we find another way. If they judge us chaotic and unpredictable, let's show them exactly how unpredictable humans can be. The plan that emerged was desperate, audacious, and quintessentially human. While the combined Terran fleet would engage the Watchers' advance forces, creating a diversion, Kane would lead the Thermopylae directly to the heart of the Vega Drift, to the source of the Watchers' power. Their advantage lay in what the ancient alliance had discovered. The Watchers, despite their godlike power, operated on fixed principles. They were bound by laws and patterns as surely as humans were bound by biology. They could be predictable in their judgment. As the massive carrier prepared to depart, Ilara made a discovery that changed everything. The original signal, she explained urgently to Kane. I've been analyzing it at quantum resolution. It's not just a warning or a lock. It's a blueprint. The ancients didn't just imprison the Watchers. They were trying to guide whoever found the signal to a more permanent solution. Which is? Kane asked. Symbiosis, she replied. The Watchers can't be destroyed without unraveling the laws of physics in this sector of the galaxy. But they can be redirected, their purpose recalibrated. The journey to the drift was harrowing. Twice they nearly lost the ship to spatial distortions. 3 crew members vanished without trace during a particularly violent reality fluctuation. But finally, they reached the boundary. Now a maelstrom of collapsing dimensions as the Watchers continued their emergence. At the threshold, they were met by a manifestation, a swirling vortex of dark energy that coalesced into a rough approximation of humanoid form. When it spoke, it did so directly into their minds. UANSWERAFT or AGE is of silence. You break wait is sealed. Now all the well it'll be ordered. Kane stepped forward. We didn't know what the signal meant. We were curious, not malicious. Curiosity as chaos. Chaos threatens all life. Order must prevail. Without chaos, there is no growth, Kane argued. Look at your history. You were created to protect life, not control it. The entity pulsed with energy. Protection requires control. No, Kane countered. Protection requires understanding. You've forgotten your purpose. Before the entity could respond, Ilara activated the device they had constructed based on her analysis of the signal, a quantum resonator that broadcast the complete, unaltered blueprint left by the ancient alliance. The effect was immediate. The entity's form destabilized, stretching and contracting as conflicting directives battled within its consciousness. Around them, space itself seemed to hold its breath. "You were never meant to judge," Ilara said softly. "You were meant to witness, to learn, to understand the value of diversity in the cosmic ecosystem." The entity's response came slower now, uncertain. "We protect." "Yes," Kane agreed. "But protection without understanding becomes destruction. The species you were created to guard are gone, destroyed by your protection." A silence fell, not the deadly silence of the Watcher's passage, but a contemplative pause. When the entity spoke again, something had changed in its tone. "We have ERRET." What followed was beyond human comprehension, a negotiation conducted in quantum states and probability fields. The Thermopolis systems recorded only fragments, energy patterns shifting, reality reconstituting, and the boundary of the Vega drift slowly, gradually stabilizing. When it was over, the entity had transformed. No longer a swirling vortex of judgment, it had become something more defined, more focused, a presence that observed rather than controlled. "We will WATC. We will learn. Humanity will teach." The implications became clear in the days that followed. The Watchers would not retreat to their prison, but neither would they continue their advance of silence. Instead, they would remain at the edge of known space, observing humanity and the other species as they evolved naturally, chaotically, beautifully. In return, humanity would teach them what they have forgotten: the value of unpredictability, of growth through chaos, of protection through understanding rather than control. "It's not victory," Kane told the Earth Council upon their return, "but it's survival. More than that, it's opportunity." 1 year later, a permanent research station was established at the boundary of the drift. Named Horizon, it housed scientists and diplomats dedicated to communication with the Watchers. Ilara Chen became its first director. On the station's inaugural day, she stood at the observation deck, watching the shimmer of the boundary where reality met something greater. Behind her, humanity continued its chaotic, brilliant expansion across the stars. Before her waited patient entities older than civilization itself, learning once more what it meant to protect without controlling. Between them stood humanity, curious, unpredictable, and unafraid to answer calls from the darkness. Every 17 seconds, a signal pulsed from Horizon Station into the drift. Not a warning any longer, but an invitation. A conversation 5,000 years in the making. And the stars, no longer blinking in dread but shining with possibility, looked on.